She smoothed out the tablecloth, adjusting the silverware until everything was in perfect alignment. The wine bottle stood next to 2 glasses, his favourite one already filled. The soft flicker of candlelight cast shadows across the table, making the scene look warm, intimate, exactly how it should be. But beneath his plate, carefully placed, sat an envelope. Inside were the divorce papers. Her hands didn't shake as she stepped back and surveyed the scene. She had spent years making things perfect for him, his meals, his home, their life together. Every detail had always been just the way he liked it, and tonight would be no different, except for one thing. Tonight, she was the one in control. The moment she had discovered the truth had been like an electric shock to her system. A text message flashing on his screen, a name she didn't recognize but instantly understood. "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing." She hadn't reacted immediately. She had stared at the words, waiting for her brain to catch up with her heart. A mistake? A misunderstanding? Number it? Had all come together too quickly. The late nights, the unexplained business trips, the way he had started keeping his phone face down whenever they were together. The pieces had been there for months, waiting for her to put them together. And when she did, the pain had been unbearable. For hours, she had sat in their bedroom, hands gripping the sheets, trying to force the hurt away. Tears had burned her eyes, but she refused to cry, because as the pain grew, something else took its place. Anger, determination, a plan. She had no intention of screaming, of breaking down, of letting him see her shattered. Number. She would not give him that power. He had taken enough already, so she had made a decision. If he wanted to act like their marriage was a lie, she would be the one to end it on her terms. The front door opened. Footsteps echoed through the house. She took one last steadying breath before turning toward him, her face calm, her hands resting lightly on the back of the chair. "Hey, babe," he said, shrugging off his coat, his voice casual, oblivious. "This looks amazing." She smiled, tilting her head. "I thought you deserved something special." He grinned, walking toward the table, the smell of home-cooked food filling the air. He had no idea. Not yet. But soon he would sit down, he would lift his plate, and the truth would be served. Her fingers hovered over the phone screen, her breath caught in her throat. The message had appeared in an instant, bright, undeniable, impossible to ignore. "Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. When can we do it again?" Her chest tightened. Her mind screamed at her to look away, to put the phone down and pretend she hadn't seen it. But she couldn't. The sender's name was saved as just a single letter, S. But she didn't need more than that. Her husband's phone, lying face up on the kitchen counter, had betrayed him just as easily as he had betrayed her. Her pulse roared in her ears. She stared at the message, willing it to change, to disappear. But it didn't. It sat there, glowing against the screen, mocking her. She inhaled sharply and locked the phone, placing it exactly where it had been, as if nothing had happened. Her mind raced. Had this been going on for weeks, months, years? Every excuse, every late-night meeting, every unexplained business trip. Suddenly they weren't just coincidences. "I'm working late. I have a last-minute meeting. Don't wait up." Lies. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. She had spent so much time trusting him, believing that he was the man she had married. She had ignored the little things, the gut feelings, the distant stares, the moments when he had been too quick to put his phone away. She had told herself she was being paranoid. She had told herself she was imagining things, but now the truth was staring her in the face. A wave of nausea rolled through her, but she pushed it down. She wouldn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she straightened her back, took a deep breath, and exhaled slowly. Confronting him now wouldn't change what he had done. She could storm into his office, throw his phone at him, demand answers. But he would lie. He would always lie. No, she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of watching her break. She wouldn't waste her breath begging for explanations she already knew. He thought he was careful. He thought she was clueless. That's what made it so easy for him. That's why he never thought twice about coming home with a kiss on the cheek, telling her he loved her. But he had underestimated her. A calm settled over her, one she hadn't felt in hours. He had made his choice. Now she would make hers, and when the moment was right, she would destroy him with it. She sat at the desk, her hands steady as she flipped through the paperwork. The divorce papers were crisp, every word staring back at her like a promise that she would never allow herself to be fooled again. She had spent the last 24 hours making sure there were no loose ends. The lawyer had assured her that everything was in order. Bank accounts were reviewed, assets were protected, and every document was ready for him to sign. No begging, no second chances. Her finger traced over her name on the last page, the place where she had already signed, sealing the fate of their marriage. It should have hurt more, but it didn't, because this wasn't heartbreak anymore. This was closure. She closed the folder and placed it neatly into the envelope. It was almost poetic, really. The man who thought he was so careful, who believed he had gotten away with his lies, would sit down for what he assumed was a peaceful dinner, only to realize it was his last as her husband. She walked into the kitchen, glancing at the clock. He would be home soon. The scent of roasted garlic and simmering herbs filled the air, his favorite dish warming in the oven. She had arranged the table beautifully, candles flickering, the wine bottle uncorked, the plates set perfectly. To anyone else, it would seem like a romantic evening, a celebration of love and devotion. But tonight, it was revenge, wrapped in elegance. She slid the envelope under his plate, pressing it down just enough so that it wouldn't be obvious at first glance. Her chest rose and fell in a steady breath. She felt no panic, no hesitation, only control. Everything was set. Tonight, he would finally taste what betrayal felt like. The door opened, and he stepped inside, shaking off his coat as if it were any other night. The scent of his favorite meal filled the air, and a slow smile spread across his face. "This looks amazing," he said, walking toward her, pressing a casual kiss to her cheek as if he deserved to, as if nothing had changed. She smiled back, steady and composed. "I wanted to make something special." He pulled out his chair and sat down, running a hand through his hair before reaching for the wineglass. He took a sip, exhaling in satisfaction, completely unaware of what was waiting for him. "Crazy day at work," he said, shaking his head. "Meetings back to back. I barely had time to eat." She nodded, listening, watching. Lies slipped from his lips so easily. He talked about projects, about clients, about how exhausted he was, never once hesitating, never once imagining that she knew. She watched the way he lifted his fork, taking his first bite of the meal she had prepared, completely oblivious. She waited. He took another sip of wine, glancing up at her. "You're quiet tonight." She tilted her head, lips curving slightly, just enjoying the moment. His smirk widened. "Well, I won't argue with that." And then the moment came. He reached for his plate again, lifting it slightly to adjust his napkin, and that's when he saw it, the envelope. His brow furrowed as he pulled it out, flipping it over in his hands. "What's this?" he asked, his tone light but curious. She took a slow sip of her own wine, setting the glass down carefully before meeting his gaze. "Open it." Something in her voice made him hesitate. He glanced at her, then back at the envelope, his fingers sliding under the seal. The paper inside felt heavier than it should have. His eyes scanned the words, and for the first time in a long time, she watched as his confidence faltered. His breath hitched. His posture stiffened. His eyes darted back up to her, wide, searching. What is this?" She folded her hands in her lap, her expression calm, controlled. "Divorce papers." Silence. The weight of those words settled between them like a final blow. His mouth opened, then closed again. For the first time, he didn't know what to say. She leaned forward slightly, her voice even, steady. "I know everything." The fork slipped from his hand, clattering against the plate. The sound echoed through the room, sharp and final. And for the first time since their marriage had started crumbling, she saw fear in his eyes. He stared at the envelope in his hands, his fingers tightening around the edges as if holding onto it would somehow change the words inside. His confidence drained in an instant, his smirk vanishing, replaced by something she had never seen before: uncertainty. "What is this?" he asked, his voice quieter than usual, a slight tremor breaking through his usual charm. She lifted her glass, taking a slow sip of wine before setting it down with precision. "Go ahead," she said, tilting her head slightly. "Open it." His eyes flicked up to meet hers, searching for an explanation, for a hint that this was some kind of joke. But there was no softness in her gaze, no hesitation, no trace of the woman who had once believed his every word. With a deep breath, he tore open the envelope and pulled out the papers. The moment his eyes scanned the top of the document, his entire body stiffened. Petition for divorce. Silence swallowed the room. The air between them shifted. For the first time, he was the one caught off guard. The fork in his hand slipped from his fingers, clanking against the plate. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She had imagined this moment over and over. The satisfaction of watching him scramble for an excuse, the way his world would come crashing down the way he had destroyed hers. But now, sitting across from him, watching his reality finally crack, she realized something. She didn't feel the need to scream. She didn't need to ask why. She already knew, and she didn't care anymore. He swallowed hard, flipping through the pages, eyes darting across the fine print. "You can't be serious." She raised an eyebrow. "Do I look like I'm joking?" His head shook, his breathing uneven. "Look, I don't know what you think you know, but this is insane. We don't have to do this." She leaned forward slightly, her voice steady. "I know everything." His shoulders sagged as his face paled. "It's not what you think," he rushed out. "You're overreacting." She let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. Don't sit there and insult me with another lie." His hands curled into fists around the papers. "We can fix this," he said quickly, his voice laced with desperation. "It was a mistake. I made a mistake." She held his gaze, her expression unshaken. "No," she said simply. "You made a choice, and now so have I." His lips parted as if he had something else to say. Another excuse, another empty promise. But for the first time she didn't care to hear it. She reached for her glass one last time, lifting it in a silent toast before taking a final sip. "Enjoy your dinner," she said, standing up. "It's the last one we'll ever have together." And with that, she walked away. He gripped the papers in his hands, flipping through them as if the words might change, as if there was some mistake. His breathing was uneven, his fingers trembling slightly at the edges. He wasn't smirking anymore. He wasn't in control. She had taken that from him. He looked up, his eyes desperate, his voice lower now. "We don't have to do this." She remained standing, her face calm, unreadable. "Yes, we do." He pushed back from the table, his chair scraping against the floor. "Please." His tone was different now, no arrogance, no empty excuses, just fear. She had spent years waiting for him to fight for their marriage, to fight for her. And yet, the only time he seemed willing to do so was when it was already too late. She inhaled slowly, steadying herself. The pain was still there, deep in her chest, but it was no longer controlling her. "I made a mistake," he continued, taking a hesitant step toward her. "I was stupid. I wasn't thinking, but you can't just throw everything away over one mistake." Her jaw tightened. "One mistake?" He swallowed hard. "Okay, more than one," he admitted quickly. "But we can fix this." She studied him for a long moment. It was almost pathetic how easily he had reduced his betrayal into something small, something insignificant, as if it hadn't shattered her, as if it hadn't made her question everything about the life they had built together. "You made your choice," she said, her voice even. "Now, I'm making mine." His eyes widened, panic flashing across his face. "Wait, just stop for a second, just think." "I have," she said simply. His chest rose and fell sharply. "I love you." The words might have meant something once, might have made her stop. But now? Now they felt hollow. She glanced down at the divorce papers in his hands, then back at him. "If you really loved me," she said, "we wouldn't be standing here right now." The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. She turned, picking up her purse, her movements slow, deliberate. He stepped forward, reaching out, but she pulled away before he could touch her. "Don't," she said softly. "Just don't." His hands dropped to his sides. She could hear his breathing, uneven and shallow, as she walked toward the door. The weight that had been pressing against her for months, years, lifted with every step she took. As she reached for the doorknob, she hesitated, just for a second, not because she doubted her decision, but because this was it, the moment she had finally chosen herself. She glanced over her shoulder, meeting his gaze one last time. "Enjoy your meal," she said, her lips curling into the faintest smile. And then she walked out, leaving him behind with nothing but his regret. The sun dipped low over the horizon, casting warm hues of gold and pink across the sky. She sat at the small cafe table, fingers curled around a steaming cup of coffee, feeling the gentle breeze brush against her skin. The quiet hum of laughter and conversation surrounded her, but for the first time in a long time, she felt truly alone in the best possible way. Peaceful, free. It had been months since she walked out of that house, since she left behind the betrayal, the lies, the version of herself that had once been so desperate to hold on to something already broken. The pain had lingered at first, threatening to pull her under, but she hadn't let it. She had refused to be defined by someone else's mistakes. She had moved forward. Her job had become a place of growth, not just survival. She had thrown herself into new projects, met new people, and found a strength within herself she never knew existed. The loneliness that she once feared had become a gift, a chance to rediscover the woman she had been before him, before heartbreak. Her phone vibrated on the table, the screen lighting up with a name she hadn't seen in weeks. Him. She exhaled slowly, picking up the phone, staring at the message that appeared beneath his name. "I miss you. Can we talk?" She didn't feel the rush of emotions she had expected. No anger, no sadness, no longing, just a quiet understanding that she had already made her choice. She placed the phone face down, letting the message fade from view. There was nothing left to say. A waiter approached, setting down a slice of cake with a small smile. "On the house," he said. "You seem like you're celebrating something." She laughed softly, picking up her fork, taking the first bite. He wasn't wrong, because for the first time in years, she wasn't waiting for anyone. She wasn't looking back. She was finally, completely free.